They never tell you how thin the veil between normal and abnormal really is, how quickly the mundane can dissolve into the inexplicable. I was one of those people who thought life followed rules, routines, predictable patterns. That belief shattered in the fall of 2019 when 3 people disappeared in front of me, one after the other. It started innocently enough. My cousin Ben invited me to spend the weekend at his cabin, deep in the woods of Catskill Park. Ben was a nature nut, always hiking, camping, or stargazing. He swore up and down that his spot was unparalleled for the night sky. I wasn't much of an outdoorsman, but I needed the break. Work had been eating me alive. A quiet weekend away sounded perfect. The first night was beautiful. The stars stretched endlessly above us, glittering against the pitch-black sky. Ben and I sat on the porch with his 2 friends, Mia and Caleb. They were an odd pair. Mia was quiet, almost shy, while Caleb was loud, constantly joking. They didn't seem to have much in common, but somehow it worked. We drank beers and told stories, laughing until our voices echoed through the trees. Around midnight, Caleb got up to grab another drink. That's when we heard it. A low, metallic hum, faint but persistent. Yeah, it sounded like a distant swinging window and an earthquake in choral bonanza. Midnight, Caleb got up to scatter some dried fruits and water. The distant screeching of furniture in the night. The distant screeching of furniture in the night. "Do you hear that?" Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ben nodded, his expression uneasy. "Probably a generator somewhere," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Caleb returned, holding his beer and frowning. "What the hell is that sound?" he asked. We all listened in silence. The hum grew louder, like a swarm of invisible bees. Then, without warning, the porch light flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. The stars above seemed to brighten for a moment, as if compensating. "Maybe the breaker tripped," Ben said, standing up. He went inside, leaving the door ajar. Mia and Caleb followed him, but something made me stay. I couldn't shake the feeling that stepping inside would make me miss something important, something wrong. The hum shifted, deepening into a throbbing pulse that seemed to vibrate in my chest. Then I saw it, or rather, I didn't see it. A shadow moved across the clearing. But there was no source. It was like a piece of the world had been erased, a hole cut into the air. It passed between the trees and vanished. "Ben!" I called, my voice shaking. No response. "Huh?" I stepped inside the cabin. It was eerily silent. The lights wouldn't turn on, and the faint glow of my phone's flashlight barely cut through the dark. I walked to the living room, empty. Then to the kitchen, also empty. My heart raced as I called out again. "Ben? Mia? Caleb?" Nothing. The hum outside intensified. My ears ached from the pressure. I stumbled back onto the porch, desperate for some kind of explanation. The shadow was back, larger this time, moving faster. It circled the clearing like a predator stalking its prey. Then, with a flash of blinding white light, it stopped. And Caleb was gone. He had been right next to me just moments before, laughing at some crude joke he'd made. Now there was only empty space. No scream, no struggle, just gone. "Caleb!" I shouted, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the suffocating stillness. Mia and Ben burst out of the cabin, panic written across their faces. "What's going on?" Mia cried. "Caleb's gone," I stammered. "He just disappeared." Ben grabbed my arm. "What do you mean disappeared? Where did he go?" Before I could respond, the hum returned, louder than ever. The ground beneath us seemed to vibrate. Another flash of light blinded us. When it faded, Mia was gone too. I fell to my knees. Ben stood frozen, his mouth hanging open in silent horror. "This can't be real," he muttered over and over like a mantra. "Ben, we have to get out of here," I said, grabbing his sleeve. He didn't move. He just stared at the spot where Mia had been, as if willing her to reappear. "Ben!" I shouted, shaking him. Finally, he snapped out of it. We stumbled back into the cabin, slamming the door behind us. The hum seemed distant now, but neither of us dared speak. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. We sat in the dark, too afraid to move. Then the cabin started to shake. At first it was subtle, a faint tremor, but it quickly escalated into a violent quake, as if the earth itself were rebelling against us. The humor turned, deafening now, like the roar of 1,000 engines. The walls warped, bending and twisting like they were made of liquid. "Run!" Ben shouted. He bolted for the door. I hesitated for a split second, long enough to see the shadow materialize again. It moved with impossible speed, engulfing Ben before he could even scream. I ran. My legs burned. My lungs screamed for air. But I didn't stop. The forest blurred around me. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. The hum chased me, growing fainter with every step until finally it was gone. It's been 4 years. I've tried to make sense of what happened, tried to find answers, but every lead ends in silence. The cabin was gone when I went back, nothing but an empty clearing where it used to stand. No police report, no search party, no trace of Ben, Mia, or Caleb. Sometimes I hear the hum in my dreams. It's always faint, a distant reminder of that night. And sometimes I feel like something is watching me, waiting. They never tell you how thin the veil really is, but I know now, and I'm terrified of what's on the other side. They say the road can hypnotize you if you drive too long, that it plays tricks on your mind. I thought it was just one of those urban legends, but that was before I stumbled onto the motel, before I realized that some places exist outside of logic, outside of reason. It was late October, and I was driving cross-country to visit my sister in Oregon. Work had been relentless for months, and I needed the change of scenery. I decided to take the scenic route, long, winding highways cutting through forests and mountains. It was supposed to be peaceful. I'd been driving for nearly 10 hours straight when the fog rolled in. It wasn't normal fog. It didn't creep in slowly, didn't give me time to notice it swallowing the horizon. One moment the road was clear, and the next I couldn't see 5 feet ahead of me. I slowed the car to a crawl, squinting through the thick white shroud. The clock on the dashboard glowed 11:58 p.m., the only source of light besides my dim headlights. A sign appeared suddenly, its letters glowing faintly in the haze. Restwell Motel, vacancy. Almost missed the turn, but exhaustion made the decision for me. The gravel driveway crunched under my tires as I pulled up to the building. It looked old. like something out of the 1960s. A long, single-story strip of rooms with peeling paint and flickering neon lights. The main office was empty except for an ancient desk and a single dusty bell. I rang it, and a man appeared almost instantly from a back room. He was tall and gaunt, with a pale complexion that made his bloodshot eyes stand out. "Need a room?" he asked, his voice dry and raspy. "Yeah, just for the night," I said, trying not to stare at the faint scars crisscrossing his hands. He slid a ledger across the counter, and I scribbled my name. No credit card swipe, no key card, just a rusty brass key marked Room 7. As I walked to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the motel was watching me. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the fog had seeped inside the building. My room was sparse, a single bed, a small TV, and a nightstand with a cracked lamp. It smelled faintly of mildew, but I was too tired to care. The first strange thing happened around 2 a.m. I woke up to a faint knocking sound. It wasn't coming from my door. It was somewhere inside the room. My heart pounded as I sat up, scanning the dimly lit space. "Hello?" I called, my voice barely more than a whisper. The knocking stopped. I told myself it was just the pipes. Old buildings like this always had quirks. But then I saw it. A faint outline of a figure standing in the far corner of the room. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. No response. I grabbed my phone and flicked on the flashlight. The corner was empty. The next morning, the fog hadn't lifted. It clung to the ground like a living thing. I went back to the office to return the key, but the place was locked. No sign of the man from the night before, just a closed sign hanging lopsided in the window. I decided to leave the key on the desk and hit the road, but when I got back to my car, the tank was empty. I could have sworn I'd filled it up the day before. Walking seemed like the only option. I grabbed my phone and tried to look up a nearby gas station, but I had no signal. I cursed under my breath and started down the driveway, hoping to find a town or a passing car. The road stretched on endlessly, flanked by dense trees and thick fog. I walked for what felt like hours, but the scenery never changed. No cars. No buildings, just the fog and the trees. And then I saw the motel again. At first, I thought I'd gotten turned around, but that didn't make sense. I hadn't taken any turns. Yet, there it was. Rest Well Motel. The same peeling paint. The same flickering neon sign. I walked back to the office, desperate for answers. This time the door was open. The man was sitting behind the desk, his bloodshot eyes fixed on me. "Lost?" he asked, his lips curling into a faint smile. I need gas," I stammered. And I just walked for miles. I'm back here somehow." He tilted his head, as if considering my words. "Strange, isn't it?" he said, almost amused. The road plays tricks on you out here." I demanded an explanation, but he just chuckled and slid the ledger toward me again. Maybe you should stay another night." I glanced down at the ledger. My name was still there, along with dozens of others. But the dates next to them didn't make sense. Some were from decades ago, others from dates that hadn't even happened yet. That night, the knocking returned. This time, it was louder, more insistent. I didn't bother calling out. I just sat there, gripping the phone that no longer worked, listening as the knocks moved around the room. The figure was back too, but now it was closer, just beyond the foot of the bed. Its outline was sharper, more defined. I could see the faint glint of its eyes, cold and unblinking. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the corner until the sun rose. When I finally stepped outside, the fog was gone. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue. My car was parked exactly where I left it, the tank miraculously full. I didn't question it. I just drove as fast and as far as I could. I made it to Oregon a day later, but something about me had changed. People kept asking if I was okay, saying I looked pale, tired. I didn't tell them about the motel. I didn't tell anyone. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the knocking. And sometimes, I wake up to find faint outlines of figures in the corners of my room. Hey, I don't know how I left that place, or if I ever really did. But one thing is certain, the road doesn't let you forget. It started with the lights. I wish I could say it began with something subtle, something easy to ignore, but the lights weren't subtle. They burned like fire across the night sky, searing into my memory as vividly as the smell of smoke and scorched earth. I was staying at the Henderson Ranch, a sprawling property in the middle of nowhere, Montana. I'd been hired to photograph the place for a glossy travel magazine, looking to feature hidden American treasures, quiet landscapes, rustic charm, untouched wilderness. It was supposed to be an easy gig, but the moment I arrived, I knew something was off. The first night, the ranch's caretaker, a wiry old man named Roy, warned me about the lights. He said it like it was an afterthought, just another part of life out here in the wilderness. "You'll probably see 'em," he said, chewing on a toothpick. "Been coming around more often lately. Ain't nothing to worry about, long as you stay inside." I laughed, assuming he was joking. "What are they, Aurora Borealis?" Roy didn't laugh. His weathered face stayed serious. "Not exactly. I saw the lights that same night. I'd set up my camera to capture some long exposure shots of the stars. The sky was breathtaking. So clear I could see the Milky Way cutting across the heavens like spilled sugar. Then, out of nowhere, the stars began to vanish. At first I thought it was clouds rolling in, but the way they blinked out didn't make sense. It was like something was moving across the sky, blacker than the blackest night, blotting out the stars in perfect, deliberate lines. And then the lights appeared. They weren't natural. They couldn't be. Pulsing orbs of vivid blue and white shimmered in strange, geometric patterns, zigzags, spirals, and grids that no human hand could orchestrate. They hovered silently, their glow illuminating the ranch like it was the middle of the day. I scrambled to adjust my camera, heart racing, but before I could take a single shot, the lights shifted, zipping across the sky with impossible speed. They disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving only silence. The next morning, I told Roy what I'd seen. He didn't seem surprised. "They've been coming around for years," he said, pouring himself a cup of black coffee. "Started back in '83, far as I know. My daddy said they ain't never hurt nobody, just like to watch." "Watch what?" I asked. Roy shrugged. "Us, I reckon. Livestock, too. Couple of my cows went missing last month. Found one of them a few days later, half burned, like it had been cooked from the inside out." I stared at him, waiting for him to crack a smile, tell me it was all a joke. But Roy didn't joke. His face was carved from granite. "Don't go looking for answers," he said finally. "The lights don't like curiosity." "Of course, I didn't listen." And the next night, the lights returned, and this time I was ready. I'd set up my tripod in the middle of the field, armed with every lens I owned. Around midnight, the same eerie glow appeared on the horizon, growing brighter until it consumed the entire landscape. The lights moved differently this time. They spiraled lower, their patterns shifting erratically, almost as if they were searching for something or someone. I focused my camera on the largest orb, its surface shimmering like liquid mercury. Through the viewfinder, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Shapes moving inside the light, dark silhouettes, vaguely humanoid, but impossibly tall and thin. They moved in unison, their limbs bending at unnatural angles. The high-pitched whine filled the air, making my ears ache. My camera's electronics flickered and died, the lens locking in place as if frozen. I backed away, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I couldn't. My feet felt rooted to the spot, my body paralyzed by some invisible force. And then I saw it. One of the figures stepped out of the light. It didn't walk. It glided, its movements smooth and silent. Its skin, or whatever passed for skin, shimmered like molten glass, reflecting the lights around it. Its head was elongated, with deep-set eyes that glowed faintly, as if lit from within. It didn't speak, but I felt its presence in my mind, a strange, intrusive sensation, like someone rifling through my memories. Images flashed before my eyes, my childhood home, my first car, my mother's face. Then, as quickly as it started, it was gone. The figure tilted its head, as if studying me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only watch as it raised one spindly arm and pointed toward the ranch, toward Roy's house. The lights above intensified, casting the landscape in stark, blinding brilliance. And then the figure vanished. The lights zipped upward, disappearing into the sky in an instant. The high-pitched whine stopped, leaving a ringing in my ears and a sick feeling in my gut. I ran back to the ranch house, desperate to warn Roy, but when I got there, the door was wide open, swinging gently in the wind. Inside, the house was empty. Roy was gone. The only sign he'd been there was his coffee mug, still half full on the kitchen table. I called his name, searched the house, the barn, the fields. Nothing. It was as if he'd been erased from existence. That was a month ago. I've told no one. Who would believe me? I've spent every night since then looking at the photos I managed to take before my camera died. Most of them are useless, blurry streaks of light and static. But one stands out. It's a close-up of the largest orb, and in the center you can just barely make out the shape of a figure. Tall, thin, arms outstretched. Every time I look at it, I hear that high-pitched whine in the back of my mind, and every night I watch the sky, dreading the moment when the lights return. Because I know they will. They weren't done watching.